I have been intentional not to make statements out of respect for the criminal justice process and the grand jury proceedings as they have proceeded in this regard. While I respect the grand jury process, I am disappointed to hear the DA's press conference statements regarding anticipated indictments of APD officers related to the 2020 protests. As a department, we asked these officers to work under the most chaotic of circumstances in May of 2020 and to make split-second decisions to protect all participants. The size, scope, and tenor of the crowds was underestimated by management. Officers were prepared for hundreds when instead they faced thousands, placing them in potentially the worst possible circumstances to manage escalating crowds. While certainly not every moment of the protest could be classified as a quote-unquote riot, there were significant portions of times that the crowds were riotous and violent.
All right, welcome back, guys. We're going to go over this article that came through. Somebody sent it to me. Thank you, guys, all of you who are sending me articles and videos and everything. We're going to try to break this down and see what's going on here. So this article came out in Rolling Stone and says, charges slapped on Austin cops who injured demonstrators at Black Lives Matter protest. There cannot be trust if there is no accountability when law enforcement breaks the law, the local district attorney said. Let's take a look at this picture. Several thousand protesters surrounded Austin Police Headquarters and shut down Interstate Highway 35 on May 30th, 2020. Accountability for police violence is bigger in Texas. A grand jury in Austin has indicted as many as 19 officers on charges of using excessive force against protesters who took to the streets in the Texas Capitol following the murder of George Floyd in 2020. The indictment set up perhaps the most sweeping criminal prosecution of law enforcement officers anywhere in the country, stemming from violent policing of Black Lives Matter protests. Travis County District Attorney Jose Garza announced in a press conference Thursday that multiple indictments will be forthcoming against Austin law enforcement officers. Garza, a reform-minded district attorney whose official bio refers to our broken criminal justice system, said that the facts uncovered while investigating police misconduct during the protests are disturbing. Evidence presented in the grand jury, Garza said, suggested that many of the Austin protesters hurt by cops were innocent bystanders, and that many of the victims of police violence suffered significant and lasting injuries, including wounds to the head, face, and body. It kind of feels good to be reading this. I know many police supporters, they're probably saying, oh, this is bad because they're going to go after police officers when they're just doing their job. Folks, no, they are not just doing their job. They're beating up on people, and just like it reads here, let's not ignore the fact that there are innocent bystanders. Is that just collateral damage to policing? Absolutely not. Let's keep reading, folks. Without naming the munitions used against protesters, Garza said, we know that the majority of victims were injured by a deadly weapon capable of causing serious bodily injury or death. He added that some will never fully recover. The indictments were announced shortly after the city reached a historic $10 million settlement with two protesters who were hit in the head and face, respectively, by police beanbag rounds. I absolutely agree. I'm going to show you guys a clip right now that I seen this morning of an officer here in Bakersfield that was just recently arrested as well for grabbing somebody's phone and slamming it on the ground just because the guy got away.
A Bakersfield police officer is under arrest tonight and facing a charge of vandalism. BPD says Officer Nicholas Bell was investigating a hit-and-run crash last month when he allegedly damaged a cell phone found inside a vehicle. Several officers reported they observed Bell throw the phone repeatedly on the ground in frustration because the driver had fled the scene. Bell was placed on administrative leave while an investigation was conducted. BPD recommended he be charged with vandalism.
If it's in your policy not to break the law, not to do these things, don't do it. Just do your job. The indictments have not yet been unsealed, and Garza said their details will not be announced until those charged have been booked. But the Austin American-Statesman, citing the city's police union chief, reports that 19 officers were charged by the Travis County grand jury. The police chief did not immediately return a request for comment. The Associated Press is also reporting that 19 cops were indicted on charges as serious as aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Well, folks, this makes me wonder. A lot of times police officers do get charged, but do they really see any justice? Do they really do any time? I've seen police officers do something really bad and then they're allowed to retire, and later on the reports say that the reason they're allowed to retire is so that their families won't suffer from this. What? That makes absolutely no sense, dude. Like, are you kidding me? That doesn't happen with regular folk out in the streets. Like, hey, I got kids, man. I apologize, I broke the law. Can you let me go so they don't suffer? It doesn't make no sense, right? Let's keep reading. At his own Thursday press conference, an emotional Austin Police Department Chief Joseph Chacon said he was extremely disappointed to hear of the impending charges. The chief defended his cops, saying he did not believe that any conduct by the APD officers during the protest would rise to the level of criminal violation. You see the culture, folks, that we have in policing? It's let's back the blue. That's what they mean by back the blue, folks. Back the blue specifically means to protect cops. Has nothing to do with protecting the people out there. All you folks out there that are putting back the blue on your bumper stickers, on your cars, in your windows, it's stupid, because they're not there to protect you. Shame on you, Department Chief Joseph Chacon. Chacon, who was assistant chief during protests, referred to the 2020 demonstrations as riotous and violent, describing rocks, bottles, and fireworks that were hurled at officers. He said that APD management had underestimated the size of the crowds and that the officers' weapons at times did not perform in the manner anticipated, adding that the department now prohibits the use of less lethal munitions for crowd control. The rank-and-file reaction of Austin cops to the widespread indictments will be closely watched. After a single Portland police officer was charged with misdemeanor assault of a protester, the city's entire riot squad resigned that team in protest. Ultimately, folks, this is what I get from this right here. The district attorney's seen a gross misuse of power, folks, and wants to do something about it. He wants the culture of violent police to stop. But the chief of police, he doesn't want that. And usually you have the chief of police and the district attorney working together. Is this a new culture that we're seeing where nobody is really being allowed to break the law? Like I said, here in Bakersfield this morning, I seen that an officer was arrested for something that he did. This is a culture that I can stand behind, where bad police officers are arrested. But it doesn't end there, folks. We need to see these officers that commit crimes, we need to see them prosecuted as well. Police officers that commit crimes wearing the badge and the gun, they should be made an example out of. The people pay tax dollars and put their trust into policing, and they're losing that trust every day, folks. There's kind of a new phenomenon that's going on, and it's called First Amendment auditing. When I came on scene, there was only a handful of channels. One of the things I did is start helping other channels grow because I wanted to see folks supporting other folks in different communities. This First Amendment auditing community has grown like wildfire, and now chiefs of police have been fired. We just seen a sergeant being suspended. We're asking questions and we demand answers. For some reason, many public officials tend to think that we the people cannot go inside these buildings and record and ask questions. They tell us to turn the cameras off. They call the police and try to get people arrested. You folks, not me, not the guy behind the camera. Yes, they've done it to me, but they're doing it to you, and they will do it to you. Let's say you go to the DMV and they make a mistake and they mail your tags to a different address, but you get pulled over and they impound your car. They made the mistake, but you're gonna pay for it. Over and over and over again, public officials make mistakes. They're human. We get it. But we cannot have a culture where they're allowed to make mistakes and we can't as a people. It makes absolutely no sense. People are seeing it, people are tired of it, and they're doing something about it. Now I know that First Amendment auditing has had its ups and downs. Some folks want to do this and some folks want to do that. They're auditing churches and private businesses or whatnot. I don't think that's what the original premise was. Shout out to Carlos Miller and Jeff Gray at Honor Your Oath. I personally like to try to keep the original premise to record public officials, government agents, ask them questions, hold them accountable. We the people need to really learn how government operates. Not only that, we also need to learn that we have rights, folks. If you don't know your rights, you don't have any rights. On this channel, we push the First Amendment as much as possible so that we can learn it together and that you never forget it. You have a freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom to assemble, and freedom to petition. There's 5 elements, and the Second Amendment was written to protect those elements. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you on the next video. Peace.
Property destruction and looting took place over several days at the beginning of the protests. Rocks, frozen bottles of water, bottles containing bodily fluids, commercial-grade fireworks, and other objects were hurled at officers and into crowds in an attempt to seriously injure. If you recall, a recent federal court jury convicted an individual for attempting to deploy a Molotov cocktail in front of our municipal court building, which is attached to this building, APD headquarters, during these same protests. And I believe in many instances that officers were simply attempting to protect themselves and other protest participants. Additionally, the weapons provided to our officers did not perform in all instances in the manner anticipated. APD recognized this and now prohibits the use of less lethal munitions in crowd control situations. I am not aware of any conduct that, given the circumstances that the officers were working under, would rise to the level of a criminal violation by these officers. We are at the beginning of the criminal justice process. As we move forward, these officers must be afforded all of the same protections of any defendant, including the presumption of innocence and the right to a speedy trial. I am confident that as these cases proceed, all relevant evidence, including hundreds of hours of body-worn camera video and other video sources, will be made available in court and to the jury. As we go through this process, I have been and remain supportive of the hardworking men and women of the Austin Police Department.